very good evening to you. This is First News. I'm Temba Hove. In our lead story tonight, following the appointment of the new cabinet yesterday, there is growing concern that Zimbabwe could be headed for another economic meltdown. Today's writing off of ZESA debts, the promise of free agricultural inputs, and the previous cancellation of rural and urban council debts have all undermined key aspects of national revenue generation while benefiting mostly a privileged elite.
However, the major beneficiaries like those in the farming community, and we all know that the majority of the people who have benefited on the issue of farms are senior government officials and the senior ZANU-PF officials. So, and we had this problem last year when reports indicated that most of the senior government officials and politicians owed ZESA thousands in unpaid debts. So to us, it is a relief that would be mostly felt positively by those who owed huge amounts of money, but will not really be pleasant to those people who had consistently paid their ZESA bills, because with ZESA, the poor people were disconnected for owing as little as $50. So they had always been targeted by ZESA for disconnection. So this current move benefits the well-connected, the senior politicians in government and outside government.
Yesterday, Zimbabwe's new finance minister, Patrick Chinamasa, began his first moments as minister by blaming any future economic failure on sanctions.
The major objective is to grow the economy, to increase indigenous participation in the economy from the level where we are, but we do so under a regime of sanctions, and that is the reality. So we have to intensify new friendships, new economic relationships, so that we can grow our economy.
However, economists in Harare have stated that it is the new government's own policies that will lead to lack of growth rather than any external factors.
It's quite a bloated cabinet, 26 ministers, given the size of the economy and also the size of the budget of the economy. You can see that the resources are already constrained. We have a legislature which has beyond 270 legislators, which is not even able to accommodate its MPs. If you look at the Augusta House in Harare, given such factors, you realize that the potential for this cabinet, which I would rather consider a new old cabinet, are quite very limited, knowing very well that these are ministers who have been tried, tested, and in most cases disappointed.
Independent media reports following the announcement of cabinet have been unanimous in pointing out that many of the key players in the new lineup were present and in charge of key portfolios when the economy collapsed from 2000 to 2008.
Some of the ministers have been quite very corrupt. With the case of the former South African minister, Temba Hove, having hinted to the president of Zimbabwe, Mugabe, that some of the ministers were soliciting for bribes in order to do business in Zimbabwe. So sometimes we try to let the equation of sanctions to say it is them which are incapacitating the economic growth and development of this economy. Sometimes it will be like misplacing the jigsaw puzzle of the whole corrupt tendencies which are also associated with the regime which is currently obtaining or ruling in Harare.
We asked people in Harare for their views on the new cabinet.
From the look of things, it seems as if it's the same old story. The old people we have seen failing to run this country, the same things. I don't think there are many expectations from the new cabinet. We just see the same old story.
I have some disappointments, if I can say, in the issue that the gender equality so few women have been taken to the cabinet, but the government should look into such issues in having to look at women have a great play within the sector itself.
Our major expectations are the redevelopment of the health sector as well as the finance sector. I think that's what we need at the moment as Zimbabweans.
The Zimbabwe Election Support Network has released its final in-depth report on the elections. The report states that critical factors such as inadequate and delayed voter education, an inadequate and flawed voter registration process, failure to provide the voters' roll to political parties and stakeholders on time, chaotic special voting, and the high numbers of assisted and turned away voters seriously compromised the credibility of the election. I asked the ZESN chairman what exactly his organization means when it says these issues seriously compromised the credibility of the election. Dr. Zwana, with this number of issues picked up by your observers, are you saying that your organization resoundingly condemns the outcome of these elections?
Well, I think we cannot say resoundingly condemn, but what we can safely say is there were quite a number of flaws which really point to issues of whether we can really say it was a fair contest, because some of the issues that were picked also contributed to in a way to the outcome of the election. Was it a fair contest in your opinion? Well, I think in terms of what was taking place, some of the flaws and the irregularities, I would say some of the candidates were disadvantaged. The judge presiding over the MDCT case to appoint non-elected mayors yesterday deemed the case not urgent. The party's spokesperson, Douglas Monzora, told First News that Justice Bere refused to hear the arguments and the case will now be set down in the court calendar, which could take some time to resolve. He said the MDCT has a strong case and the party will decide on the next step, but will not give up on it. ZANU-PF has won the 3 council runoff elections held yesterday. The council runoff elections were held in Kadoma Ward 4, Gusile Ward 5, and Mtasa Ward 30, after the candidates in those wards received the same number of votes in the harmonized elections. In Syria, while the diplomatic impasse continues, so does the killing. This morning, government warplanes bombed one of the main hospitals serving rebel-held territory in the north of the country, according to activists and video footage. 11 civilians, including 2 doctors, were killed in the strike against the hospital northeast of Aleppo city. The emergency and radiology departments were destroyed in the attack. Yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned against a U.S. strike on Syria, saying such action risked escalating the conflict beyond that country and unleashing terrorist attacks. Writing in the New York Times, Putin said there were few champions of democracy in the 2.5-year war in Syria, but there were more than enough Al-Qaeda fighters and extremists of all types battling the government. He repeated assertions by his government and Damascus that an August chemical weapons attack that the United States blames on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government was likely the work of opposition forces seeking to provoke foreign intervention. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting his Russian counterpart later today in Geneva to ask for details of a credible and verifiable plan to list, quarantine, and destroy Syria's chemical weapons stocks, the conditions on which the U.S. has suspended its threat of a military strike. In sports, Gareth Bale yesterday joined his new Real Madrid teammates for his first training session since his record-breaking $130 million transfer from Tottenham Hotspur. Video footage released by the club showed a smiling Bale being greeted by teammate Cristiano Ronaldo upon his arrival at the Valdebebas training camp, and then being greeted by coach Carlo Ancelotti and his deputy Zinedine Zidane at a pre-training session in a meeting room. Bale then joined the rest of the players in a 2-hour session. It is unclear whether the former Tottenham forward
will make his debut during Saturday's La Liga match against Villarreal. And that ends tonight's bulletin. On behalf of the news team, I wish you pleasant viewing on First TV, your nation, your station.